federal judiciary wanted to remove Judge Howell from the case, citing other what they believed were biased comments. Your reaction to Judge Howell tonight?
We do. Many judges need to be removed. Judge Howell included, Judge Reyes, Judge Boasberg. These judges obviously cannot be impartial. They cannot be objective. They are district judges trying to control our entire country, and they're trying to obstruct Donald Trump's agenda.
And Judge Boasberg is a busy judge. He was assigned to the Signal Gate, which is such a ridiculous name, but the Signal Chat case, which is a lawsuit filed by parties, which I'm not sure they have standing to file, but President Trump calls it disgraceful that this judge, again, who's ruled against you on the Tren de Aragua deportations, is now assigned to the Signal case.
Yes.
Your reaction tonight to that?
Laura, he has multiple cases. I guess it's a wild coincidence against Donald Trump and our administration, and now he has the Signal case. He shouldn't be on any of these cases. He cannot be objective. He's made that crystal clear. You know, these judges are taking personal attacks, too, at many of the cabinet secretaries and these judges across the country. And again, they think they have authority, but it's going to be short-lived because these cases are going to get to the Supreme Court very fast. We're doing everything we can.
CNN is their Ellie Honig. Sometimes it's fair, but, you know, mostly biased. So you guys have to open up a Signalgate investigation at DOJ. Watch this.
So Pam Bondi has been MIA. There is no indication that she's going to open an investigation here. And by the way, when she was up for a confirmation as AG, you remember, one of the concerns is, would she be able to exercise independence? She told the Senate, absolutely, I will be completely independent. There's no reasonable prosecutor who could look at this and say it doesn't even need to be investigated.
Your response to your pal there?
Yeah, there's a reason why their ratings are plummeting, because they're putting people like that on TV. Chatter. We could care less what they say. We're going to continue forward on all of these cases.
So this is not a concern of yours, Inspector General, you know, idea of Inspector General investigation or congressional investigation down the road. You are completely confident that this was a mistake and nothing more than that.
We are, and all of our intelligence officials who were on it are confident of that as well.
I mean, do you not know, like, how many Democrats that I know over the years who have been on Signal? I mean, of the highest level Democrats. And is that changing in the government now, though? Is Signal not going to be used, or is it going to be used going forward? Are you aware of it?
I think Signal's a very safe way to communicate. I don't think foreign adversaries are able to hack Signal, as far as I know. And
maybe people just have to keep an eye on their contact list a little bit more carefully going forward. Attorney General Pam Bondi, you were up at what, 2? What time did you get up this morning?
Got up about 4.
Oh, 4.
About 4.
Okay.
4.
All right. Well, you don't look any worse for the wear. Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it very much.
From El Salvador, and he will not be living in our country much longer.
How's this for a bad hombre? The feds nabbing a suspected top 3 leader of the brutal MS-13 gang. Agents busting into his home in Virginia, where they found 3 firearms, ammo, 2 suppressors. Authorities say he's from El Salvador and in America illegally. Hey, Harold. Turns out all we needed was a new president to catch these bad guys in your face.
I just want to emphasize the pace and the focus. And so, no, these were not lists that were available in the previous administration, because they wouldn't do that. I cannot emphasize enough the collaboration and support and leadership out of the new administration that is so different than what we saw in at least the previous 3 years of my administration.
And south of the border, DHS Secretary Noem did a house call to check on Venezuelan gang members Trump kicked out of the country. Christie coming face to face with the criminals and warning illegals out there this could be their new home soon.
I want to thank El Salvador and their president for their partnership with the United States of America to bring our terrorists here and to incarcerate them and have consequences for the violence that they have perpetuated in our communities. I also want everybody to know, if you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed, and
Inmates are like, please come back. You're welcome here anytime. Jesse, you know what I love about that visit? She stood in front of criminals in their environment, because usually Democrats, when they want you to see criminals, they're in court. freshly bought shirt, clip-on tie, makeup over their teardrop tattoos, more as the remorseful suspect rather than in their own soup of crime.
So this is a PR game for the people illegals here. So if you're an illegal and you're a criminal, that's where they're going to send you.
Exactly.
So she's basically saying, you want your head shaved, you want handcuffs, you want to sit a jail cell with 90 bad hombres, self-deport. And you're right. I'm shocked there wasn't a prison break.
Yeah.
Because that's like a riot right there. I'm surprised if they could walk Tom Homan through that jail and you'd think he's hot at that point. But Christy, my God. So, Greg, we already had so many gangs here. We had Crips, you have Bloods, and then you have the Mafia, you have the Chinese guys and the Russians in Brooklyn. It's like we had enough already.
Yeah.
And at the height of the crime wave, 2021, 2022, Biden decides to let in 25,000 MS-13 guys. And imagine you're at the Border Patrol and you see a guy with face tattoos and you catch and release him. And not only that, you give a guy with face tattoos a bus ticket to Manhattan. And then if he gets arrested in Manhattan, they don't even deport him.
Yeah.
They let him back out on the street. We always tried to impeach Joe for Hunter. They should have impeached him for the border.
Yeah.
Because that's really an impeachable offense. And they had all these FBI guys running around going after these Jan 6ers. Why? You should have been going after these guys. And what a waste of time because Trump pardoned them all. So it's great to see these guys going after real crime. And that's what we need to get back to.
Judge, in a rare show of intelligence, Jesse makes a good point. Don't you love how Democrats only care about vetting criminals when they're leaving?
Yeah, on their way out.
Not when they're coming in.
Right, on their way out. You're absolutely right. In fact, I had an appointment today somewhere, and it doesn't matter where, but the person started crying. She was so worried that we were deporting people who maybe shouldn't be deported. And I said, if they have these tattoos that indicate they're Tren de Aragua, shouldn't they be deported? Well, maybe they didn't mean it, and that's what we're dealing with. But look, here's the good news, Greg. I mean, one of the top 3 MS-13 gang leaders, okay, he's in this country for a while. He's living with his mother for at least 6-8 months that we're aware of, but silencers, long guns, ammunition, the whole thing. So now the question is, what's going to happen to him? Is he going to be prosecuted? Is he going to be released by some judge who thinks that, we can't hold this guy, or is he going to be deported? And Kristi Noem, to her credit, that messaging was excellent. You're going to come here, boys, and this is what's going to happen to you. And I think the issue now, given especially what's happened with Boasberg and the Circuit Court of Appeals, where they said that, we're going to keep we're not going to hold the temporary restraining order. Now this has to go to the Supreme Court to see if the White House can deport these people under the Aliens Enemies Act. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now, but the message is clear.
Most viewers aren't aware, Harold, that you were once in a gang. And we've actually have makeup applied over your teardrop tattoos. So you're a little biased here. But how soon before your Dem allies demand we respect the right to due process for this character?
It's good to be back around the table and good to know you have not lost your sense of humor or fastball. I couldn't agree more with what's already been said. If President Biden and his team had focused more on the border, Jesse, I think you're right. Not only would it have been redounded to their benefit politically, as the judges noted, it would have been a good thing for the country. I hope they prosecute these guys. I hope they convict these guys, and I hope they send them to that jail. Because I think we need to have in our records here that these guys are that, whether they try to come back into the country or not. I salute the president and salute this prosecutorial team and Ms. Bondi and what they've been able to accomplish here. Now, as it relates to some of the other things we're conflating here with sending these gang members back to Venezuela, I support that too. We should follow the law and do it. As I said before, sentimentally, the country is with President Trump, though. If we don't follow every bit of it, you're right. People are going to want these guys out. And the problem is if you round up 50 of them and 3 of them are Americans and didn't do anything, if that's your cousin or your brother, or your sister or someone, I think people may have an issue with it. But all that being said, I salute what Ms. Bondi and her team has done in capturing and arresting this MS-13 leader. And God bless them going to get the rest of them.
Dana, it's interesting because it's easy for us to target Democrats for what they haven't done, because it's legit, even Harold admits, but they will target Republicans for how they've done it.
Right.
Because the aim is unquestionably correct.
Well, I also think, though, that we don't talk enough about what they did and the effects of it. So you have Governor Youngkin, who said, I can't tell you the difference that it's made. He said he had been trying to get after this guy for 3 years. The Biden administration was unresponsive. Here we have within the first 3 months, the top guy is nabbed. And why does that matter? I don't think we've also done enough to explain that once all of these illegals got into the country, they spread out everywhere. That's what gangs do, take over territory. And the violence that they commit is terrible. But one thing that's really interesting, a lot of it is aimed towards women. And then you had the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, basically saying in your face, MS-13, and that we're the ones that are going to be in power now, and we're going to do something about it. You're not going to be able to get away with it from before. The other thing is the communications on this, again, continues to me to be excellent, and it's one of the reasons that the country continues to be with President Trump, because they are showing their work. And you can see it visibly. And they got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be there when this went down this morning. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Tom Homan, and then you have Kristi Youngkin traveling, and you have somebody going. Remember the visuals that you had to use for Kamala Harris was her interview with Lester Holt arguing about whether she had been to the border. And that was it. The other time, she did one interview, like a statement saying, don't come to America, with basically a steel wall behind her. My last point is, I have a feeling that the countries of the UK, France, Spain, Italy, that are just inundated with so many migrants. And you think they sleep in France and then try to sneak over to the UK when they can because the benefits are so generous. It won't be long, I don't think, until some of these countries who have a populist streak now running through them will say, we want to do the same type of thing.
Just need one person to break the seal.
Is our gang called the Five?
Yes, exactly.
5 teardrops.
Yeah, and you know what? The initiation ritual is after this show, Harold.
Can't wait.
Get him!
Get him!
Good to have you back, Harold.
Wow, what did
All
I miss?
Terrible. Up next, Elon and the Doge dudes hit back at deranged Democrats.
Brand new details about the accused MS-13 gang leader who was arrested in Virginia in the early morning hours today. Fox News getting a firsthand look now at this operation. You see Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel on the scene. Their agents say that they found weapons, ammo, silencers, all piled up in the garage bedroom when they arrested 24-year-old, and we now can tell you his name, Henry Yasu Viatro Santos. They say he's from El Salvador, and he has been in the United States illegally. The MS-13 leader of the East Coast operations is the way that the DOJ is describing him right now, and a top 3 member in the United States. And as I said, he was arrested in Woodbridge, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares is going to join us in moments. He was there this morning, and so was our justice correspondent, David Spunt, reporting live on all of this from Washington. This is quite a story, David. What have you learned today?
Martha, it was quite extraordinary to see it play out. A 24-year-old alleged MS-13 leader, in fact, the leader of East Coast operations, is what DOJ is alleging. This man, Henry Josue Villatoro Santos, just made an initial appearance in court. Now, this arrest happened before the sun came up. We were there exclusively to watch it unfold, joining Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel as they received an early morning briefing, and I do mean early, with SWAT teams before those SWAT teams in to make the arrest. Bondi, Patel, myself, and others watched this all happen on monitors. We can't show what it looked like, but we did see the scene from multiple different angles, from the ground and the air.
This is what can happen when you put good cops in good places to take on bad guys. And America should be watching this. And we are proud to be here standing with these brave warriors.
Joining the FBI was the ATF, Virginia State Police, ICE, and the Prince William County Local Police Department. Now, they do this kind of thing multiple times a week, Martha, but this guy happens to be one of the top 3 leaders in the country, according to the DOJ. The reason they had a SWAT team in military-looking vehicles, they expected him to be fully armed. Luckily, though, no one was harmed.
All of our law enforcement officers are safe. That was the number one thing. They're safe. They executed a clean, safe operation, and the bad guys in custody. And thanks to the FBI, we got one of the worst of MS-13 off the streets this morning.
And we have some photos from the court documents that were just filed. One, as you showed at the top, shows guns. The other, gun suppressors, as I mean on the right there, also known as silencers. Right now, Villatoro Santos is being charged with being an illegal alien in possession of a firearm, but sources say they expect more charges down the road. We see this from time to time, Martha. It's what's known as a holding charge before other charges can come down the pike. And as you'll talk to the Attorney General in Virginia right there, this is all part of a new effort by the FBI and the Commonwealth of Virginia working together on these types of cases.
Okay, real quick before I let you go, what was it like when you watched this live?
It was pretty unbelievable to see just how clear some of those cameras were. You could see multiple different angles of an operation going on live. This was in a residential neighborhood. We're told that there were children in the home. Luckily, they were okay. They got out. They made it out to safety. But a 24-year-old living in suburban Virginia and got a knock on the door, many knocks on the door, and came out shortly after 6 a.m. this morning.
David, thank you. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Sounds like a big gap. Thank you very much. Let's bring in the Virginia Attorney General, Jason Miyares. Attorney General, great to have you with us today. And obviously, the people of Virginia are a little bit safer today, and the East Coast. If what we're learning about this individual, that he was overseeing MS-13 operations for the East Coast, turns out to be the case. What does that look like? What have you learned about this operation? How do you know he was in charge of it?
Well, one thing that we have seen, this is a great example of making sure that no one is siloed. We see that sometimes in law enforcement between state, local, and federal. And I know that when we came in the office, Governor Youngkin and I really were big on cooperating with our state and local, making sure they were working together. What is great about what General Bondi and the Director Patel have done is making sure that state and local now have federal resources, the intel analyst and the intelligence. Their resources are candidly impressive, and they have come in and really turbocharge a lot of the work we have done going after these transnational gangs. MS-13 is obviously one of the most notorious between drug dealing, extortion, human trafficking. They're some of the worst of the worst. This individual got on a variety of individuals' radars really in the last year, kept coming up. And so this is a great example of using that intelligence and our analysts to both track him down, work together. I cannot commend enough the professionalism of what we have seen by our federal partners, our partners of the FBI, DEA, HSI, really working to track this person down. It has been just night and day what we have seen before from Main Justice versus what we see now, really putting the priority of going after these transnational gangs and getting them out of our communities. And Dale City in Northern Virginia is a great community. This person was there living among us.
I just have a minute left, but were you aware of him? Was he being watched? And were the neighbors aware in any way that this guy was the East Coast leader of MS-13, 24 years old, living in their neighborhood?
Listen, I'm not going to get too much on that because I think you'll probably see that in future indictments. What I can say is a lot of these individuals go by nicknames. You have to now identify who he is, where they live, track them down, and then most importantly, surveillance it and determine a good time to actually serve and arrest these individuals so there's minimal possibility of harm to our agents. The federal partners did fantastic work on taking down one of the top individuals that really has caused so much harm in our community, and we're very glad he is now arrested and facing federal charges.
Well, it's fascinating to see this operation. I hope that he's able to lead to the other two leaders of MS-13 in the other two regions of the country. We look forward to hearing more about this indictment and learning more about what you have on this case. Attorney General Miyares, thank you very much. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State and a Fox News contributor. I wanted to, Mr. Secretary, first of all, welcome you to the show again. Thanks for being with us. Start off this segment by looking at where we are now with illegal border crossings compared to where we were February of last year. February of last year, 189,913 people came across the border illegally. February 2025, 11,709. That's a reduction of 94%. And President Trump does not have one more tool in his toolbox than Joe Biden did a year ago. So how did this happen?
Well, John, thanks for having me on. We know exactly how this happened. He made it a promise during the campaign, and then he built a team to go do it, and they are now executing against this vigorously. Look, just President Trump's presence makes clear to those who are thinking about coming here illegally, recognize that the costs will exceed the benefits, and then the hard work that's been done by Tom and his team, Tom Homan and his team, and others to get those who are already here, who came during the Biden administration or some of them before that, are now being identified, prosecuted, and moved back to the country where they need to go. These are the indicia. That math is really amazing. And these are the indicia of a real focused effort making a lie of the thing that President Biden said, which was, I need more laws to fix this. It was just about intention and will and capability. And the Trump administration has demonstrated it has each of those three. And you can see the great results. We're all safer today because of this, John.
You know what I think is funny, Mr. Secretary, is that the Biden administration tried to tell people not to come, but we didn't see anything like this from Kamala Harris when she went to the Northern Triangle countries, or from Alejandro Mayorkas. I mean, I would just want to play again DHS Secretary Noem's video, because it really is something.
If you come to our country illegally, this is one of the consequences you could face. First of all, do not come to our country illegally. You will be removed and you will be prosecuted. But know that this facility is one of the tools in our toolkit that we will use if you commit crimes against the American people.
Talk to me about just how you get to develop an effective message like that. I mean, you guys make it look easy, Republicans, compared to what the Biden administration was doing.
Jackie, it's very easy. Who would have believed President Biden or Vice President Harris when they said they didn't want them to come here after they had already allowed millions and millions of people to come in? So their credibility was shot. And so this begins with the credibility of President Trump. And then second, you make clear that the costs will be real through not just words and messaging, but real actions. And for now, the first months of the Trump administration, those actions have been incredibly public and effective and made clear. And so folks who are here telling family members not to come, folks who are here now recognize they may be the next to be deported. And so you can begin to see this tide turning in a way that is serious and important and will make us all safer, where the Biden administration could never do that. They could run as many commercials as they want. You could trot out Secretary Buttigieg or Secretary Mayorkas. Who was going to believe them, Jackie? The answer was no one. And the migration problem that John showed the statistics on was incredibly real. And the number of terrorists that came in, the number of criminals that came in, made it really dangerous here in the United States. And it's a blessing to see this tide turning.
So I don't know if you've commented on this, Mr. Secretary, but what do you make of these federal district judges inserting themselves in the deportation of people under the Alien Enemies Act, people who President Trump claims were sent here in part under the auspices of the Maduro regime to create chaos in this country?
Two things, John. First, these judges are stepping into the maximal point of presidential power. He is the chief executive, has a responsibility on national security. This is directly in his lane, and no Article III judge has any right to interfere in that in any material way. Second, the fact that these district court judges are doing this on a nationwide basis is just comical to me and indecent and certainly not constitutional. I think it was Justice Sotomayor who in a conference said that one day as well. So they shouldn't be interfering in national security, nor should they be doing it from one little district trying to do it all across the country. I think the Supreme Court will fix this, and I hope they'll do it quickly.
It was actually Justice Kagan who said it, but she did say it in a very forceful way. So, I mean, the sentiment is there, no doubt. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Justice Kagan it is.
Yep, appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Have a good day.
All right.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
Brooke Taylor, who is reporting live from where we will get this breaking news in Jena, Louisiana. Those proceedings underway. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Martha. Yeah, that hearing's been going on for about an hour right now, and it's pretty much a waiting game because there's no cameras or phones. We have another reporter who's been outside that ICE detention facility and said it's really chaos going inside that courtroom because over a dozen of his supporters showed up. They said they were there till 6 a.m. just demanding to get inside. Mahmoud Khalil has been held at this ICE detention facility here in Gina, Louisiana for about more than a month since he was arrested in New York City. The government arguing that Mahmoud Khalil should be deported under an immigration law that allows the Secretary of State to deport aliens considered a threat to U.S. foreign policy. Now, the Department of Homeland Security had to submit evidence proving this. In a two-page memo, Rubio argued that feds can deport Khalil for, quote, participating in anti-Semitic protests and disruptive activities, which fosters a hostile environment for Jewish students in the United States. Well, Khalil's attorneys, they claim this violates his freedom of speech.
Well, we try to establish that people like Mahmoud have a constitutional right to speak out in this country, and they should not be, the government should not be using this really bogus statute saying it's against U.S. foreign policy interests.
And the State Department has revoked over 300 student visas so far. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that student visas are a privilege. If you come into this country as a student, the government expects you to go to class and study, not vandalize campuses across the country. His supporters, Martha, they plan to hold a press conference around 3:30 Eastern time. Of course, that could change depending on when this hearing ends, but we're by our phones right now, just waiting for that update.
Okay, Brooke, we know you'll get it to us as soon as it comes through. With that, we bring in Jonathan Turley, constitutional attorney and Fox News contributor. Jonathan, always good to have you here. Now, the administration has made some sort of varying arguments on their reasoning to deport Khalil. What is your take on how the judge may be approaching this at this hour?
Well, the administration has not made it easy for this judge. I'm surprised by that two-page letter because there is a concrete basis to deport Khalil if you simply establish what was originally alleged, that he participated in a protest that involved property damage and trespass and other criminal acts. That's conduct. That doesn't go to the content of his speech, and they can clearly remove him for that. The letter instead focuses more on his views, and that's putting it in a very difficult light for this judge and balancing what are legitimate free speech concerns against the power of the administration. Now, where his counsel, I think, is going to have a hard time is, as you just heard, they said, we don't think this statute should be used. Well, the statute is going to be used, and this immigration judge is not going to say it can't be used. And that statute gives Secretary Rubio sweeping authority. And it's not clear how much a judge, let alone an immigration judge, can question the judgment of the Secretary of State underneath that statute once he's issued this type of declaration.
Yeah, you know, another thing that I was looking at today is the green card holder rights, because it's interesting that this ends up in the immigration court because the State Department has made the argument that they can remove him for conduct, as you just pointed out. Now, he's a green card holder. And he is here sort of, you know, at the permission of the United States government. But is anti-Semitism, promoting anti-Semitism on campus and essentially preventing Jewish students from their right to go to class, is that hate crime? And can hate crime be the issue here that could have him removed for his green card?
Well, that's an excellent question. And as you can tell in that language, there's a lot of subjectivity, which is what his counsel has said that should concern the court. And the letter says that this could be otherwise lawful conduct, but the secretary can still have you deported for it. I'm surprised by that framing because it makes me think that they're using this case to go for the three-point shot, that they want to use this case to establish strong precedent in other cases that will be based on not as developed records. So we'll have to see how this judge reacts to all of this. They did not produce the type of evidence that some of us were expecting, some concrete ties of what Khalil knew about and directed the protest itself, that after all resulted in citations, after all were unlawful. That seems the clearest and easiest basis. I think the administration wants to establish a broader principle here to say, you might not like this law, but it gives Secretary Rubio sweeping authority, and we just used it.
Yeah. So it sounds as if you're making the argument that the administration attorneys are almost overcharging and that they're shooting it for too much of an umbrella prosecution in a sense here, and that they would have been smarter. Well, we'll see what the judge decides, right? But just looking at it from as we wait for this to go much more pinpointly at conduct, anti-Semitism, potentially a hate crime to prevent Jewish students from feeling safe on the campus might have been a cleaner way to pursue this.
Right. They also have statements that they say were omitted or facts omitted from his original application. I tell my students in litigation all the time, the old adage, aim small, miss small. And this ain't that. I mean, that letter is basically saying we can deport people for otherwise lawful conduct if the secretary believes it is harmful or threatening to our national security. That's the whole Megillah, and they want to establish it. Maybe they view this as their strongest case to do so.
Maybe. We will see what the judge says, and it will set some sort of precedent here because they have a number of other students who they have also in the same position that they're hoping to remove based on basically violating their right to be in the country on a student visa or even in a green card on this case. Jonathan, thank you. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Mark.
We'll get you back if we get this decision.
Let's bring in Carrie Urbahn now, Fox News legal editor. Tell us what we need to know about this right now, Carrie.
Well, I disagree with Khalil's lawyer when he says there was nothing in the memo to support his removal. That's just not true. If you read the memo, and anybody can pull it up online and read this for themselves, they say the basis for removal is that Khalil was involved in anti-Semitic activity, disruptive protests, and citations for unlawful actions during those protests. And, we have to go back to the basics here. The law gives Secretary Rubio very broad discretion in terms of when and how he can remove an alien. And all it requires is for that alien's presence or activities to be adverse to foreign policy. Well, first and foremost, Mr. Khalil is an alien. Yes, he has more of a protected status than the average non-citizen as a lawful permanent resident, but that's still not a citizen. Citizenship is a gift. It's not a right. So that satisfies that prong. Then his presence and activities. Well, we know that Khalil drove the efforts that involved intimidating Jewish students on Columbia University's campus. They took over a building, and as part of, quote, negotiating with the administration to, release the building and to stop, their activity, they were pressuring them to cut ties with Israeli businesses and their partnership with Tel Aviv University. Well, Donald Trump's priority is to crack down on anti-Semitic activity, and if our number one ally is Israel in the Middle East, I don't see how Secretary Rubio, in this instance, doesn't have discretion to remove Mr. Khalil under the law. And so I guess we'll see what happens today. And as Brooke just mentioned, the hearing just began.
Yeah, and Carrie, I'm curious as to how they proceed, because you're talking about Mahmoud Khalil being the first student detained. If this judge rules against the administration, do they stop? Do they put a freeze on detaining any more students, or do they go forward with the appeals process knowing that maybe a different judge comes out with a different outcome?
Well, that's exactly why this hearing is so important, because it's going to set the tone for these other student visa cases that we're seeing. And as we know, some of these students who had their visas revoked for similar reasons as to why Mr. Khalil is before the immigration judge today, they've already begun self-deporting. So President Trump and Secretary Rubio's actions have already had an effect here as far as people taking action and just removing themselves, in the first place. But to your point, Trace, yes, I think whatever happens here is really going to dictate what happens with everyone else.
Yeah, Carrie, two pieces of critical sound here. This is Ellie Kananim on America's Newsroom earlier today. She's the former State Department Deputy Special Envoy and the former chair, obviously, to combat anti-Semitism, the chair of the department, I should say. She also went to Columbia, and she said this.
Columbia University, which I'm ashamed to call my alma mater, has had extensive amount of time to clean up their act, to make sure that Jewish students are protected from anti-Semitic incidents. What we're seeing is that Columbia University are not behaving like good faith actors, and the Trump administration is taking every right action to, in fact, protect Jewish students from assault that they've been under at Columbia.
And Secretary Rubio put it this way when the president went around the table in that cabinet meeting yesterday. Listen.
No one's entitled to a student visa. The press covers student visas like there's some sort of birthright. No, a student visa is like me inviting you into my home. If you come into my home and put all kinds of crap on my couch, I'm going to kick you out of my house. And so, that's what we're doing with our country, thanks to the president.
Here's your thoughts on that, Carrie.
Yeah, it's a privilege, not a right. It's really that simple. And we have to remember something else. This isn't just isolated to New York City. We have to remember, and even going back in time, if you recall, around October 7th and what happened afterwards, Jewish students were literally afraid to go to class. They were being intimidated. They couldn't go. They were staying home. They were afraid for their safety. That's ridiculous. This is the United States. And I think one of the most compelling and troubling things that I remember from that time is that Hamas and Hamas-affiliated groups were watching closely what was happening on universities in America at the time, specifically Columbia. How do we know that? They were putting out statements of support for what Mr. Khalil and other student leaders were doing. How is that not adverse to our foreign policy interests? It is, because other adverse nations are looking at the United States and they're saying, wow, this is interesting. The United States is letting this happen on their watch. They're feeling pretty good about this. And how does that make our number one ally in the Middle East feel? Israel. Probably not so great. So I think Secretary Rubio has a lot of bandwidth here to remove Mr. Khalil and other people who are involved in similar activities.
I'd like to get your take, Carrie, if I can, on the other big case. We're talking about the Abrego Garcia case, the Maryland man, illegal immigrant who was sent to El Salvador. So basically the judge is saying, or the government is saying, listen, if this person is told they bring him back, they don't want him brought back immediately. They want to know the process of how you're going to bring him back. Is that right?
Yeah, this is a bit of a messy situation. The Supreme Court last night issued an order, and they said, look, this individual deserves some kind of process. He has to come back to the United States to face this kind of process before he's deported to El Salvador or removed where he already is. But here's the catch. They're telling the lower court judge, what do you mean by effectuate? It's one thing for the United States to, have this removal proceeding, and they're saying they should have. This man was entitled to some kind of due process, and that did not happen. However, you as a district court judge also don't have this absolute authority to tell the government exactly how and when to do this. So it's a little bit confusing. So that hearing just ended. The lower court judge said the government now has to give them an update, give this judge an update every day, I guess, until this person is returned. But look, this is a separation of powers issue again, but I think a lot of these immigration cases are coming down to something pretty simple, which is due process. And the Supreme Court this week pretty consistently is saying that whether these people are accused gang members, whether they're here illegally, they do deserve some kind of process before they are removed, because that is what we do here in the United States.
Carrie, thanks for coming on with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The decision that we have been waiting for, a judge has just ruled that the Trump administration's effort to deport Mahmoud Khalil can move forward. Correspondent Brooke Taylor, live right near that courthouse in Jena, Louisiana. Tell us what the judge is saying in there, Brooke.
Hi, Martha. Yeah, this has been long anticipated and some major news. Just to first give you some perspective, we're down the street from that ICE detention center. The courtroom is inside of there. They didn't allow any phones or cameras. So we're finding out this information from our reporter who's over there down the street. She tells us, as you just mentioned, the immigration judge has found Mahmoud Khalil removable. Khalil's attorneys have until April 23rd to file relief applications. I asked that reporter what the immigration judge was able to say. She cited those DHS papers and said that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was able to meet that burden. And again, they have decided that Mahmoud Khalil is removable. The next question, Martha, of course, his attorneys are going to fight this, but how long that process is going to take right now for him to be deported. We'll send it back to you.
All right. Breaking news. Brooke, thank you very much. And with that, we bring in Outkick founder Clay Travis, who's also an attorney. and understands this case well, has talked about it quite a bit. So he can be removed. His lawyers can appeal this decision until April 23rd. Your thoughts?
Trump keeps winning. Look, we wondered how the Resistance 2.0 would come to be. Much of the legacy media has collapsed. Even the Democrat Party doesn't seem to have an aggressive opposition to Trump. It's been the federal district court levels where people have really come after him. But Trump has been winning as those appeals have reached the Supreme Court. This is a big win in the short term for Trump. And I think it just kind of goes to demonstrate that the judicial system has decided to throw itself athwart the tracks of the Trump train, so to speak, to try to keep him from advancing. And really, much of this is about delay, right? There's this idea, and I think it's real, that next year we've got the midterm elections, the House is up for grabs, and they're trying to do whatever they can to slow the progress of Trump. But so far, when he gets it up to the appellate level, most of the actions of the Trump administration are being found legal. And unlike Joe Biden, who it felt like every time he went to the Supreme Court was getting struck down, Trump is winning a lot.
Yeah, we know Marco Rubio essentially said that in the end, they went with a couple different arguments, but in the end, they arrived at you don't have a right to be in this country. It's a privilege to come here and study. This young man is a green card holder, but this immigration judge is buying the argument that he violated the terms of the green card by participating in anti-Semitic protests. Anti-Semitism is against the rules of this country.
Yeah, just up the road, right, at Columbia, where they completely shut down the university. But this happened all over the country. And it's not just about him. It's about sending the message to students who are on campus, hey, you're not going to be able to shut down. Remember UCLA? They wouldn't let Jewish kids walk through the campus.
That's right.
I mean, this was crazy.
I think they're denying their ability to go to class, which is discrimination, a form of discrimination, and potentially a hate crime to stand in the way because the university sent them home. It's not safe for you to be here. So they created an unsafe environment on the campus.
Just think what would happen if the KKK showed up on any of these campuses and didn't let black kids go to and from the classrooms. The federal government would show up and they would say this is unacceptable. Jewish kids, like everybody else, have the right to get an education.
Yeah, and their argument was free speech. But if your free speech right is stepping on someone else's right to, they paid for their education to walk into a building and go to a classroom, then you're impeding their ability to do that.
You don't have the freedom to break the law to speak, right? There are speech parameters that everybody understands. And I think the message that's being sent here is an important one.
Yeah. So, Clay, we're going to see you in the morning.
Yes, I'll be bright and early in this studio.
Fox and Friends.
That's right. I'm looking forward to it. Never done it.
Yeah, it's
you have
early.
Some tips
the alarm
for
clock goes off early.
You have tips. You've done it a lot, so I'm excited to do it.
I'm going to set my alarm. We'll get up and watch. It's going to be a lot of fun.
No, you're not. You're going to be sleeping in. Masters is going on. Start your morning with us right here.
Clay, enjoy your New York City time.
I will. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Live from Texas, this is The Will Cain Show. Just in the last 5 minutes, a Louisiana judge determined that the Trump administration provided enough evidence to deport anti-Israel activist and Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil. Khalil's team now has until April 23rd to respond, but this is a big deal. The judge finding Mahmoud Khalil removable. The White House defended his removal, with the standard being that his beliefs, statements, and associations compromise U.S. foreign policy interests. Now let's break down the history. In December 22, Khalil entered the country on a student visa to pursue a master's degree at Columbia. The next year, following the October 7th attack on Israel, he became involved in activism, serving as a spokesperson for the university's Apartheid Divest group. That's the same organization that staged mass protests causing chaos on campus and students and with faculty. Fast forward to 2024. Khalil obtained his green card while completing his graduate studies. Then, last month, DHS agents arrested Khalil, moved him to a detention center in Louisiana, and sought to deport him. That's when a federal judge stepped in and blocked his deportation for that time being. That brings us to today. Mahmoud Khalil ruled removable. Joining me now is the author of the new book entitled On Democracies and Death Cults. It's Douglas Murray. Douglas, great to see you.
Great to be with you, Will.
This case has been a fascinating one that has ignited some debate. The debate sort of precedes what just happened in this court. It is whether or not someone in the United States, a permanent resident, can be availed with the full rights of the First Amendment, or whether or not the Constitution of the United States is in essence a suicide pact towards views that would undermine not just Western civilization, but the United States. On the other hand, it appears that the Secretary of State met the burden required, that in order to have this visa revoked, it was proved he was a threat to U.S. foreign policy. Your thoughts?
I think this has been an extraordinary case, Will, and if I can say so, at the outset, I always like to say when the issue of Mahmoud Khalil comes up, that he has become such a free speech hero for sections of the left and the right in America. But I always say, whenever they try to make him some kind of martyr, remember the name Edan Alexander. He is a 21-year-old who was born in New Jersey and is still, after 18 months, being held by the terrorist group Hamas in Gaza. If the people who had campaigned for Khalil's release or freedom had spent the last 18 months calling for the freedom of the actual kidnapped victim, the person who has actually been denied all of his rights and much more, Edan Alexander, then I'd be interested to hear these people's thoughts on Khalil. But they didn't. They have spent the last 18 months not just excusing the massacre, but in the case of Khalil and his group at Columbia University, actually praising the massacre. Let me just read, if I may, very quickly, two statements that every American should know about. The first is that the group, Columbia University Apartheid Divest, called October the 7th, the massacre that I write about in my book, quote, a moral, military, and political victory. Now, one of the other things that everyone should know about this group is that one of the things they call for, in their own words, is, quote, they say they are, quote, fighting for the total eradication of Western civilization. I'll read that again because it's so unbelievable. They are fighting for the total eradication of Western civilization. Now, I suggest that Marco Rubio, Secretary Rubio, was completely right when he said some weeks ago, what country would invite people into the country and allow them all the advantages of the country if the person in question uses their time in the country to destroy the country? Not just by, as in the case of Khalil and his group, intimidating Jewish students and threatening Jewish students and hounding them across their places of study, but by abusing the staff at the university, by physically harming people who worked there as janitors, by shutting down public buildings, by shutting down public highways, by many other things. What country in its sane mind would allow people in to do that? If I went and moved to Paris on a student visa, I think one of the things I would not do whilst there would be to try to overthrow the French state. Because if I did, I'd guess that I could get into trouble. This is not about the First Amendment's rights of an American citizen. This is about somebody coming to America who used his time in America to campaign and wage war against America.
And it's clear that the judge, the immigration judge, found that argument, and perhaps even those words that you read as submitted, we don't know the exact evidence, but perhaps as submitted by the Secretary of State, compelling to revoke a non-citizen's ability to stay in the United States and make those arguments against our foreign policy. Douglas, it feels like I've been spending hours with you recently, although we have just talked now for the first time in months. I've been listening to you in your debate with Dave Smith on the Joe Rogan Experience. I've been listening to this debate that is not untied to the conversation you and I have now, which is about when this sentiment that is very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause began to take over young people, and particularly young people here in the United States. For the audience, here's a little bit of the debate you've been having with Dave Smith.
Leveled by now.
Yeah.
But it did not go in to level the place like that. No.
Okay, they went in and leveled the place, but that wasn't their intention?
Let's just, I think, a part of a generation that's coming up has been told there is something especially wicked about Israel, and I think that people have been indoctrinated by very bad actors into this, and as a result have excused atrocities or will make excuses for them, make excuses for the people who do them. I think, in addition, it plays to some of the darkest things of the regional mind as well as the international mind.
For anyone interested in the longer 3-hour debate that covers ground from Ukraine to Israel, they can go check out the Joe Rogan Experience. Douglas, that particular portion of the debate, you were talking about the point of view among young people, not exclusively, but primarily, that is very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. Dave would argue, and did argue to you, that the last 18 months of civilian death in Gaza is a reason for that sympathy. It seems there that what you allude to is the reason is much darker, and I understand you to mean anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. I think that it's extremely important for people to realize that, of course, it's not the case that any criticism of the Israeli government or Israel's actions is anti-Semitic. Of course not. But if you spend no time in recent years on the streets protesting against the mass slaughter going on in Syria, if you didn't come out one Saturday to protest against the actual genocide that is going on in Sudan, if you didn't ever come out on the streets to protest about the hundreds of thousands of people killed in Yemen, and then you decide, in the wake of the October the 7th massacre, day after day after day, whether it's a protester at Columbia or a so-called comedian like Dave Smith, to go on and lie and defame Israel, and two, in the case of many of these protesters, to praise Hamas, to actually exalt the massacre of Jews, then yes, obviously, it's anti-Semitism. And, you know, the question I really ask in this book, Will, is, first of all, I wanted to see the ramifications of the October the 7th massacre with my own eyes, which is why I got to Israel as soon as I could after the massacre, to see the victims, to speak with the families, to speak with survivors, to meet with them in hospitals, to go to the morgues, to see the effects of what Hamas did that day. That was the first reason. And the second reason was that I wanted to see Israel's response with my own eyes. And that was why for the last year and a half, I've spent most of my time in Israel and Gaza and Lebanon. The third thing, though, which is what I really want people to think about, what I want my readers to think about, is why is it that when a democracy and an ally of ours like Israel was attacked so barbarously by people who worship death, who glorify in death, who seek death, not just others' death, but their own, why in a fight between a democracy and a death cult do we have so many people in America, particularly young people, who have chosen to side with the death cult?
You know, I spent those 3 hours, I'm not yet gotten to read on democracies and death cults, which I intend to do, but I spent those 3 hours thinking that both of you made, at times, very valid points. I think one of the most compelling pieces of evidence to support what you just laid out for us that you made during that debate, Douglas, is that these celebrations, they were celebrations, and also protests, began on October 8th. And that is the most compelling evidence as to what they are in response to, or what their message was, at least in that day, in that moment. Douglas Murray, check out On Democracies and Death Cults. Thank you so much, Douglas.
Great pleasure to be with you.
President of the Article 3 Project, former clerk for Justice Gorsuch. Mike, now this is not a federal judge. Immigration judges are separate from the federal court system. And his lawyers late today said, it's not the end of the road. We're going to file in federal court in New Jersey. Well, how do you think this is going to go on the federal level after this immigration judge ruled as she did today?
Well, President Trump campaigned on the fact he's going to secure our border and he's going to deport illegal immigrants, particularly those who support Hamas. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing here. Not only does he have that power, that duty under our immigration statutes that have been on the books for 70 plus years, he also has that duty as commander in chief to make sure we do not have these dangerous individuals in our country.
Well, ACLU's executive director today, before this ruling came out, said this is a clear attack on the First Amendment. Mr. Khalil is a permanent resident. He's not an illegal immigrant. He's married to an American citizen, is about to have a baby. And this clearly is just punishing speech that is unpopular. Your response to that?
Well, you can actually denaturalize American citizens who are naturalized if they are Hamas supporters up to 10 years after they were naturalized. So if you can do that to naturalized citizens, you can certainly get rid of these residents.
Now, Mike, the White House published a report yesterday about the benefits that illegals who were on the terror watch list received under the Biden administration, and it's staggering. The list includes 902 of them that collected Medicaid, 41 of them collected unemployment insurance, 22 received federal student loans, oh my gosh, and 409 received tax refunds. Democrats, of course, don't seem to care about this issue at all. But I imagine the American voters are going to be interested to learn more about how people on terror lists end up getting federal benefits.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? If you're a flood victim in America, the Biden administration left you with nothing. But if you are on a terror watch list, you're getting these federal benefits. How is this not harboring illegal aliens, which is a federal crime?
Mike, there was an immigration setback for Trump yesterday with that Obama-appointed federal judge who blocked the administration from expediting the deportation of about 500,000 people who Biden had paroled into the country, like 500,000, like Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians. And Trump's like, no, we're gonna cut that short. And a judge said, you don't have the authority to do that? Mike, on what grounds does the president not have that authority?
It's a very good question, because President Biden illegally mass paroled these several 100,000 illegal immigrants, and President Trump is just reversing that illegal act by President Biden. And you have this activist judge trying to stop the president. The president has the statutory and constitutional power and duty to make sure that our border is secure and people who do not belong here are not in our country.
All right, Mike, thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
But first, breaking tonight, 2 judges potentially facing judgment over immigration-related crimes. We have a follow-up to a bizarre story we first brought you last night. A now former judge in New Mexico has been taken into custody over allegations he allowed a member of a violent international gang to stay in his home. Also tonight, word of another jurist in big trouble. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt has the latest from our West Coast Bureau tonight. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Brett. And we'll start with that second jurist, Milwaukee County Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan, who was arrested by the FBI this morning and within hours was making her first court appearance, charged with concealing an illegal immigrant and obstructing an official proceeding.
No justice, no peace. Let the judge be released.
Protesters gathered outside the Milwaukee County Courthouse today, shortly after the arrest of Circuit Court Judge Dugan, who is accused of helping an illegal immigrant, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, avoid arrest by ICE officers at that courthouse. The criminal complaint against Dugan says, quote, despite having been advised of the administrative warrant for the arrest of Flores Ruiz, Judge Dugan then escorted Flores Ruiz and his counsel out of the courtroom through the jury door, which leads to a non-public area of the courthouse.
We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. You cannot obstruct a criminal case, and really, shame on her. It was a domestic violence case.
Milwaukee's Democrat mayor is furious at the Trump administration's action in arresting a judge at the courthouse.
These actions right now run completely counterclockwise to what he's trying to do, what he thinks he's trying to do, which is make a safer America.
In New Mexico, another judge appeared in federal court today after being arrested Thursday and charged with tampering with evidence in the investigation of his alleged harboring of an illegal immigrant. Joel Cano resigned in March from from his position as a county magistrate judge based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, after federal agents raided his home and took into custody Christian Ortega Lopez, allegedly a member of Tren de Aragua, as well as 2 Venezuelan men, all of whom had been staying in a guest house on Cano's property. Cano claims he saw no signs of gang membership and wrote in a letter to the New Mexico Judicial Standards Commission, quote, "I cannot help but feel that the capture of these boys is just another unfortunate addition to the current nationwide effort to apprehend, detain, and deport anyone not born in the U.S." Attorney General Pam Bondi also said today she believes that the judges in these cases are, quote, deranged and consider themselves above the law. And the AG said the arrests should send a message that the Trump administration will to act not just against illegal immigrants, but also against the judges the White House and DOJ feel are protecting those illegal immigrants. Brett?
Jonathan, thank you.
But first, a Wisconsin judge under arrest and facing charges accused of flouting federal law to help an illegal immigrant. Federal prosecutors say Milwaukee County Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan allegedly helped that migrant avoid arrest by ICE officers at the courthouse. It's a bizarre case and it's still unfolding. Hello, I'm John Roberts in Washington. Sandra, good to see you back again.
All right. Good to be back with you as well, John. I'm Sandra Smith in New York, and this is America Reports. So today's arrest of a judge marks the second such case in the last 24 hours. A former New Mexico judge and his wife were taken into custody yesterday. Federal agents arresting them for harboring a suspected Tren de Aragua gang member in their guest house.
For more on all of this, we are honored to have in the new U.S. Attorney General, Pam Bondi. It's good to talk to you, Pam.
Good to talk to you.
So let me read a little bit from the criminal complaint here. And Judge Dugan says, despite having been advised of the administrative warrant for the arrest of Flores Ruiz, Judge Dugan then escorted Flores Ruiz and his counsel out of the courtroom through the jury door, which leads to a non-public area of the courthouse. A foot chase ensued. The agents pursued Flores Ruiz for the entire length of the courthouse and ultimately apprehended him. According to this complaint, Judge Dugan was visibly angry that ICE was there to arrest Flores Ruiz, even tried to kick the deportation agents out of the courthouse.
Yeah, and to set the stage for you and Sandra, this was truly horrific. This guy was in court being prosecuted by a state prosecutor for domestic violence battery. He had beat up 2 people, a guy and a girl, beat the guy, hit the guy 30 times, knocked him to the ground, choked him, beat up a woman so badly they both had to go to the hospital. And John, you know, it's so rare for victims to want to cooperate. They wanted to cooperate. They were sitting in the courtroom with the state prosecutor. The judge learns that ICE was outside to get the guy because he had been deported in 2013, came back in our country, commits these crimes, charged with committing these crimes, victims in court. Judge finds out. She goes out in the hallway, screams at the immigration officers. She's furious, visibly shaken, upset, sends them off to talk to the chief judge. She comes back in the courtroom. You're not going to believe this. Takes the defendant and the defense attorney back in her chambers, takes them out a private exit and tells them to leave, while a state prosecutor and victims of domestic violence are sitting in the courtroom.
Wow.
You know, Madam Attorney General, great to have you here, and thanks for coming back on America Report. So we remember these words of Tom Homan, the border czar. This was March 17th, and his message on these judges who apparently are trying to get in the way of this administration's efforts. Listen.
I'm proud to be a part of this administration. We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
So when you see these judges trying to obstruct your efforts to make this country safer, what is your message to them?
We are going to prosecute you, and we are prosecuting you. I found out about this the day it happened. We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. We looked into the facts in great depth. That's her picture up on the screen, Hannah Dugan, who is now in custody. You cannot obstruct a criminal case, and really, shame on her. It was a domestic violence case of all cases, and she's protecting a criminal defendant over victims of crime.
In fact, she just had an initial appearance in court. There's also this other case coming out of New Mexico. Judge Joel Cano and his wife were arrested for harboring a TDA member at their home. The alleged TDA member had been picked up by law enforcement, and now he and his wife were picked up and arrested. And you say that you believe, as the Attorney General, that the person that they were having living at their home was a truly potentially bad individual.
Yeah, that's the judge up on the screen now who got arrested. Yeah, his name is Ortega. He was is a known TDA member. So he comes through Eagle Pass December 2023. He's living in our country. January 2025, ICE, they get a tip. Tom Homan's done a great job. Our FBI did a great job on this case, too. They get a tip that he is living with a judge and the judge's wife. So they have him arrested first on immigration charges. A Judge Damian Martinez releases him, saying that Judge Cano has a good BS meter and wouldn't let just anyone live on his property.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the associations with this violent Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, and this person that they harbored in their home, he was showing signs through clothing, we were told, tattoos. There was evidence through voice messages and text messages of his association to TDA. So what charges will Cano and his wife face, if any?
So Judge Cano, soon to be former Judge Cano, got his charges were just unsealed. He's charged with obstruction. He admitted post Miranda. He took one of the TDA members' cell phones himself, took it, beat it with a hammer, destroyed it, and then walked the pieces to a city dumpster to dispose of it to protect him. The wife also is charged with destroying evidence. Sandra, not only that, this TDA member, and he had on a necklace that said kill, something about death. He had tattoos all over him. He also had on his cell phone pictures of two decapitated victims, victims, decapitated, gruesome photos, and he was sending them out, and whoever he was sending them to was sending back saying, hey, you need to be careful. You shouldn't be sending these. You shouldn't be texting these photos out. Not only that, these two, the judge and his wife, gave him assault rifles that belonged to their daughter. That's what they're charged with. In the criminal report affidavit, he goes to a shooting range with these assault rifles, with a suppressor, with other known TDA members, and they're shooting. This is the last person that we want in our country, nor will we ever tolerate a judge or anyone else harboring them.
Let me, if I could, Madam Attorney General, come back to the Wisconsin case and Judge Hannah Dugan, because in allegedly letting the perpetrator and the attorney out through a non-public exit and allowed them to get out in front of the building. We had a situation where we've seen that I know Tom Homan was complaining about in Colorado, where there would be no transfer of a defendant from a jail to ICE custody on a detainer request in a way that was orderly and protected public safety. They would dump them off in a parking lot, and then ICE would have to chase them around with the DEA or whatever, or FBI, and pick them up. This ended up in a foot chase in public sight. It says here, a foot chase ensued. The agents, and this was a DEA agent and an FBI agent, pursued Flores Ruiz for the entire length of the courthouse, ultimately apprehended him near the intersection of West State Street and 10th Street. So the judge apparently has created a situation here where you have a public foot chase. And we all know that, while sometimes they can come off without incident, they can also turn into very dangerous situations.
John, that's exactly right. She put the lives of our law enforcement officers at risk. She put the lives of citizens at risk. A street chase, which is absurd that had to happen. But yes, she put a lot of people in danger. That judge did it. So did the other judge. Judge Cano is charged with. They were allegedly giving him assault rifles, AK-47s, AR-15s, with a suppressor, a known TDA member, letting him go to a shooting range to refine and perfect his shooting skills. What's happened to our judiciary is beyond me.
Yeah, so when the American public hears this and they think these were once upstanding people in their communities and their professions, and they put it all on the line for this, I mean, have you dug into their motive? Like, what inspired them to carry out these acts and harbor criminals?
They're deranged is all I can think of. I cannot believe. I think some of these judges think they are beyond and above the law, and they are not. And we're sending a very strong message today. If you are harboring a fugitive, we don't care who you are. If you are helping hide one, if you are giving a TDA member guns, anyone who is illegally in this country, we will come after you and we will prosecute you. We will find you.
If I could just finish off with this idea, very significant development that you're arresting judges now. Now, it could be that the judges have engaged in terribly bad behavior and deserve to be arrested. But you know what critics will say? They'll say, oh, this is a government that is expanding the powers of the Article 1 of the Constitution. Now they're arresting judges. How do you respond to that?
No one is above the law, John. No one is above the law in this country. And if you are destroying evidence, if you are obstructing justice, when you have victims sitting in a courtroom of domestic violence and you're escorting a criminal defendant out a back door, it will not be tolerated, and it is a crime in the United States of America. Doesn't matter who you are, you're going to be prosecuted.
Madam Attorney General, great to see you in the studio.
Great to see you.
Okay,
Appreciate
thank
your
you
time.
very much. Appreciate that.
But tonight, we want to go back to this stunning story that is unfolding live, and we're getting more information on this judge in Wisconsin who was arrested by the FBI today because they say she tried to help a domestic violence suspect get his way out of the courtroom as they were about ready to begin procedures, because she thought she was aware that there were federal agents in the building that were looking for him. So she spirited him out a side door, according to the filing from the FBI. This is Judge Dugan that you're looking at next to a bust of Abraham Lincoln here. So also, a former judge and his wife were arrested in New Mexico. They were accused of letting a suspected Tren de Aragua member live in their guest house after he did some work on their home. So with that, we bring in another sort of perspective on this story. We've talked the legal side of it, some of the political side, but let's bring in Ron Vitiello, Senior Advisor to the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection and former acting ICE Director. So, Ron, you have a background as an agent for ICE. If you went into this courtroom because you understood that this person was going to be in the building and this is someone that you're looking for, how would all of this have played out in your mind? And how shocked would you be if the judge let this person out the side door?
Well, this is an activity that the agents engage in, right? They make a plan. Maybe they do some surveillance. They're aware of the court docket. They probably know that some judges and maybe the defense attorneys, other people in the courtroom would be resistant to their presence. But I don't think you could imagine that the actual judge in the trial would do things like this, let the guy out the back door. She's a judge. She's supposed to be a leader, a pillar in the community, somebody that the constituency there in Milwaukee goes to as a trier of fact, right? She's supposed to be above. Her standard for law enforcement should be above, the normal person. But no, these agents show up and she berates them while she's letting this guy out the back door. So now she's going to go down infamously in history as someone who skirted the law and thought she was above the law. This is a crime. The FBI is going to charge her for lying to federal agents. They ought to charge her for aiding and abetting a criminal illegal alien in the country. The Wisconsin bar ought to revoke her license to practice ever again in her life. She deserves our scorn.
So here is a new statement from Senator Dick Durbin, Senate Judiciary Committee, on the Wisconsin judge. He says, when immigration enforcement officials interfere with our criminal justice system, it undermines public safety, prevents victims and witnesses from coming forward, and often prevents those who committed crimes from facing justice in the United States. How does this make America any safer? Your reaction to what Senator Durbin has to say here?
Well, he's very confused, right? Those law enforcement officers were there doing their job. They're going to that courthouse most likely because Milwaukee won't let him in the jail. When the guy was arrested the first time for the battery that he committed, they could have arrested him in the jail after he got arrested the first time, or when he made bail, he would have been turned over to ICE. But Dick Durbin, he wants to have it both ways. He says he's for law and order. He says he's for the people, but he's not for the victims of illegal aliens who also commit crimes in the United States. He's not for the rule of law, because that arrest would have been completely lawful and it wouldn't have interfered at all. If she would have done her job and heard that case or whatever the hearing was, they would have taken that man into custody after the hearing safely without incident. She's the one that screwed up here. And Dick Durbin, giving her cover makes us all glad that he's on his way to retirement.
Yeah, she prevented justice from moving forward for him. If he was innocent, he was being given that opportunity to prove himself so. And the ICE activity could have waited until after that process. Ron Vidiello, thank you very much. Great to have you with us as always.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack here. Roseanne, I want to start with you. She said you threatened them. She may want to clarify that, but that is what she's caught on tape saying.
Well, she's saying basically call and make themselves
Raise a
known.
ruckus.
But threaten is a different word when you say threaten. And we've seen Maxine Waters say that too. And people listen to them. Unfortunately, as we know, there are people in this society who take literally what you say. And I don't know. I don't think it was a great idea. Can we get back to the courtroom? Because I think everybody is just trying to figure out what happened in that courtroom with the judge being arrested. And yes, it's concerning. It's disappointing. But I was also thinking about the victims who were in that courtroom. I've covered many cases as a reporter of domestic abuse. A lot of these victims don't like to go against the people who have attacked them. They're scared. They're afraid of retribution. So that woman is sitting in that courtroom where all of a sudden the man that she believes, attacked her is at a side door, disappeared, and the next thing you know, who knows what happened in that courtroom? All hell breaks out. They're looking for him. I was looking over the criminal complaint, and Jessica and I were talking earlier, and she was very, very concerned about the standard, what we were starting with something like this. But when you look over this and you see that a courtroom deputy in this complaint basically said that this was very unusual in that courtroom, in the judge's courtroom. They said first, the courtroom deputy had previously heard Judge Dugan direct people not to sit in the jury box because it was exclusively for the jury use. However, the defendant was allowed to sit in the jury box. Secondly, the judge is then overheard basically telling the defendant and his attorney to go out the side door. And the next thing you know, ICE agents are being told what's going on. They're running after this guy on foot. I don't know. Something is very fishy here.
Yeah,
and smelly.
they chased him down the street.
They chased him down the street and they got him.
He had some, and there's a debate about how he got out and what the judge directed him to do.
I know everybody's worried about the judge, but
Right. And so what DHS is telling us, it says he has a laundry list of violent criminal charges, including strangulation and suffocation, battery, and domestic abuse. We couldn't verify all of that, but we could verify 3 domestic abuse charges. Infliction of physical pain or injury is what we're told. But Greg, the allegation is the judge felt like that's the guy who needed protecting.
Yeah, I would like to quote Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and every self-righteous Democrat. No one is above the law. And that includes left-wing judges who subvert the law themselves. This isn't even about political ideology or even immigration. We're seeing judges who clearly lean towards a specific side. They're called activist judges, but that's a contradiction. Judges are not activists. They are judges. Maybe this judge has a backstory with this illegal. Could it be? It's not just the gavel that she's banging, Shannon. I want to talk about Frederica Wilson. It's hard to take her seriously when she dresses like she's auditioning for the Real Housewives of the Kentucky Derby. They define what you're seeing is a lot of these people in power define their positions by their hatred for Trump. If he came out against self-harm, she would probably punch herself in the face. I understand loyal opposition. That's your role when you aren't in power. But you should have some duty to your constituents to offer them a better path than what you're seeing. What would you do differently? The whole point of this was getting rid of the worst first. We have an illegal immigration problem. We have a border problem. Now we are actually doing something that people voted for. This is the adult solution, the worst first. What is your solution other than, I don't know, trying to stop the process altogether? That's my question. Is this going to happen with every single deportation? Are they just going to try to hinder what Americans voted for, bogging it down and exhausting us with maybe like 1 case a week? something that they never did with Obama when he deported 2.4 million illegals. They're turning an administrative process into a legal one. Imagine a game where a corrupt umpire throws a flag on every play, so the game can't go forward for one reason or another. This is what they were doing. And by the way, this is what they did to the first Trump administration. They constantly waged lawfare on him. And this is lawfare now specifically pointed at the process that Americans voted for, which is to get the illegal aliens out of this country.
Well, and Greg, to your point about the polls, we have brand new Fox News polling this week that showed that a majority of people do agree and support the president, approve, Jessica, of what he's doing when it comes to border security. I mean, the numbers have gone to a trickle by any objective standard, and they say they do want people out of this country if they're here illegally. A guy who's accused of these things, is that who Democrats want to be seen aligning with or defending?
I think that Democrats and people who have respect for the separation of powers are aligning with the judge, not with this guy who was let out the side door and got picked up. Maybe he deserves to be deported out of here. He deserves to stay in court, and then he deserves to go if he's not supposed to be here, and those things are true. But yes, in our Fox News polling, you see an positive approval for the president on border security, but he's underwater in terms of handling immigration. And now that's true across the board on all the major polls. We've seen it in Reuters. You see it in Quinnipiac. You see it in the YouGov poll. Americans have only seen 3 months of what this administration is doing in terms of immigration, and they went from approving it 10 plus points to a strong disapproval. And that's because it feels completely lawless. And Greg says these are activist judges. The Supreme Court, a conservative court that Donald Trump himself was able to pack, is not an activist.
I'm talking about her.
No, I'm talking, but it's about all of them. He's gone against the Supreme Court.
But that
he's gone against the Fourth Circuit. Fourth Circuit, a Reagan appointee who wrote that decision saying you can't send this latest shipment to Venezuela. Now you're talking about this woman, a county judge. And when Pam Bondi comes out there and says, we will come after you and we will prosecute you, we will find you, that is meant to have a chilling effect.
Well,
they didn't need to.
What's your solution? Again,
but
you
they
cite
didn't
polls, but
They
I
did not
apologize.
need to
Adults have to do the adult job, and it's not going to be popular.
You know what the adult job is? First of all, not announcing this on social media, having to take it down and then putting it back up. The adult thing to do would be to have called her in and have her come in and have a conversation about it. They didn't need to publicly arrest this woman. They wanted to make a
Joey, I have a feeling you have something to say about
They
that.
didn't need to make a show of it, but everything is for the cameras.
Somebody whose actual purpose in this world is to enact justice and sometimes be the sole deciding factor on what justice is, who sits in front of people and has their entire lives in her hands, and she can't do something as simple as obey the law herself, and we should just hide it under the rug, bring her into a room and pat her on the hand for putting a guy back out on the street or trying to hide a guy from the proper authorities who punched someone 30 times and then struck a woman trying to break it up. With all due respect, this whole argument about these Venezuelan gang members or people who say they aren't in a gang, but they've got MS-13 in code on their knuckles.
To say
that, well, whatever it, okay, well, not everybody. You've also sat here and argued against using tattoos to say if someone's a member of MS-13. So anyone who has a tie to MS-13 or the government suspects of it, if you tell me that they deserve due process, I tell you that I know Laken Riley's dad, and I would go out and kick every one of them out of this country just because of Laken Riley. So when Frederica Wilson said something like more people are getting rolled up because of Laken Riley, you're damn right they are. Because this whole country saw what happened to Laken Riley. And we said, hell no. And then that act was passed by Congress that we voted in and signed into law by a president that we voted in. And if not being for due process for illegal immigrants that come here and commit crime makes me a bad American, okay, well, at least I'm still American, and that's a hell of a lot more than they are.
But conservative juggernauts like Antonin Scalia have spoken about the fact that people who are here undocumented deserve due process.
They can have their intellectual arguments. I live in the real world where people get hurt, where my sister gets a head-on collision from a drunk illegal who was brought here by a coyote that the Biden administration was happy letting operate. I live in the real world. I don't live in New York. I don't live in D.C. I don't live by the Supreme Court. I live in Northwest Georgia. I live in a town that's 78% Hispanic.
Anymore?
Abrego,
absolutely,
Abrego had due process.
That's why all those people are here.
No, he didn't.
The problem here is that you say due process, and we're all supposed to go, ooh, that must mean some kind of court. No, it's not a court. It's an administrative action. The guy was told what 2 judges said he was an illegal.
Well, something tells me he's going to get.
not allowed to be deported to El Salvador.
And something tells me he's going to have some version of due process, and it's also going to involve him not residing in this country. Okay.
Yeah.
But first, let's go to our senior White House correspondent, Jackie Heinrich. She's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What do we know, Jackie, about this latest judge who's been arrested and charged?
Yeah, John, we know that the judge has been released on her own recognizance after an appearance in federal court that was about a mile from her own courthouse, where all of this allegedly happened last Friday. According to the criminal complaint, Milwaukee County Judge Hannah Dugan escorted a Mexican national facing battery and domestic abuse charges out of the courtroom through the jury door so that he could evade arrest, and also tried to kick the deportation agents out of the courthouse. Listen here.
Judge finds out. She goes out in the hallway, screams at the immigration officers. She's furious, visibly shaken, upset, sends them off to talk to the chief judge. She comes back in the courtroom. You're not going to believe this. Takes the defendant and the defense attorney back in her chambers, takes them out a private exit and tells them to leave, while a state prosecutor and victims of domestic violence are sitting in the courtroom.
That Mexican national, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, was taken into custody during a foot chase, and now Judge Dugan is charged with obstructing and concealing. Trump administration's ordered local officials to assist federal deportation efforts or face investigation or prosecution, especially with focus on sanctuary cities. While Milwaukee is not officially a sanctuary city, they do have limited cooperation with ICE, and there are members of the state assembly protesting this judge's arrest right now, making a call to action. You had one member, Ryan Clancy, say what Judge Dugan did apparently was to obstruct fascism. That is a quote. These developments come after federal judges just yesterday blocked 3 key administration efforts that was halting citizenship requirements for voter registration, blocking efforts to withhold funds from sanctuary cities, and ordering the return of a second national who was deported to El Salvador. So much more to come on all these legal issues, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Jackie Heinrich at the White House. Sandra?
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
And tonight, much of the hate and hysteria on the left can easily be traced right back to America's college campuses, where America, capitalism, and Israel are all routinely vilified. Today on CNN, a former Columbia University student who just so happened to witness last night's murders here in Washington, D.C., spelled out the cold, hard truth. Take a look.
But what I saw in his eyes, I mean, I went to Columbia for grad school, and I saw the same thing in his eyes as I saw in the eyes of all the protesters at Columbia. Nothing different between him and them.
But they did not create this horrific shooting. They did not, you know, they didn't shoot.
They gave permission. They gave the permission. And they have called for this. They have called for Intifada revolution, which is the same thing he yelled last night.
Do you worry that there will be a conflation, though, of the two, those people who are speaking their mind, who really care about what is happening in Gaza, and those people who are like this person who did this horrific shooting, who intend to do harm?
A conflation. I mean, they are calling for Intifada. At Columbia University, they call for Intifada constantly. They're not quietly. They're loud. They're loud. You can hear it. They make recordings of themselves. So what's the difference?
Are you afraid?
Yes.
What will
We're
you do
all
about
afraid.
that?
While many Democrats and so-called journalists like that one put their heads in the sand, the Trump administration is fighting back. Just today, Trump stripped Harvard's student visa program for failing to cooperate with the DHS investigation into pro-terrorist conduct at campus protests. We've all seen it. And not long ago, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem issued this warning to all colleges and universities. Watch this.
Harvard brought these consequences.